All right. Apparently, we are live. Hello, everyone. I am
Hello.
Gretchen Wegner, and this is Taryn Fletcher.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Gretchen.
Oh, I'm really excited about this, and I'm so excited to share your writing debut with the world. And I'm also really excited to talk about this incredibly important issue,
Yeah.
and also to have you be the first person in what I hope will be an ongoing series, an anti-boring interview series. And I intend that this will be very anti-boring.
It will be, and I love being first. So here we go.
Here we go. So I want to say a little bit about myself for people who are new to me and the
Yeah.
context for having you here. And then I love the bio that you sent. And normally I don't like to read things, but I do want to read just a couple of sentences of your bio, and then I'll have you introduce a little bit more about yourself too.
Okay. Thank you.
So, for those who are new to me, I am Gretchen Wegner. I am the creator of the anti-boring approach to powerful studying. I am an academic coach and now also a teacher trainer, and I am passionate about all things study skills, executive functions, organization, and time management for teens, and then for educators. And one of the things that was so thrilling to me about your book, Taryn, which we'll talk more about later, is your emphasis on how much inner work is important for educators to do.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in my work as well around study skills and time management, like inner work on their own study skills and time management. And for you, it's inner work around identity, which we're going to look at in a moment. So that's who I am. And I have an educators club that's called the Anti-Boring Educators Club. And this year, one of the big topics we're looking at, and here's my little whiteboard, is what is anti-racist, culturally relevant academic coaching?
Mhm.
Now, there's nothing out there about that I can find about anti-racist, culturally relevant academic coaching. And so I'm reading everything there is about schools, and then I'm trying to answer that question with myself and the educators in my community. So you are a part of this research project
Yeah.
for me in answering that question. So that's me. You are, and I just love how you said this, you're an award-winning school leader, culturally responsive teaching expert, leadership coach, and businesswoman focused on building an army. I love that part. An
With
army.
my army fatigue.
Oh, yeah. I did not make the connection, but there we go. Was that purposeful?
You know what? It wasn't. I just happen to love camo, and you said army, and it's working for us both right now.
It's on brand, totally on brand. So you're focused on building an army of culturally relevant teaching practitioners in every school and community. And what I loved about that sentence is that I feel like, right, academic coaches are part of that army. And we're in the after school industry, not the during school industry, many of us, although there are more and more academic coaches on school campuses.
That's
so
right.
I'm so happy to be a part of your army. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, we need more to join. I'm so excited.
We do. Well, and we'll dig into the specifics around your school leadership experience and what your book is about. But first, I thought it would be fun for you to start, and I'll share too, since we're talking about the importance of identity and identity markers and everything that comes with that, for you to get to share a little bit more about some of your identities that are most precious and important to you.
Yeah. I mean, as teachers, right, and educators, I feel like once a teacher, always a teacher. So I definitely, whenever introduced, I let people know I was born in the classroom, and not literally, but that's absolutely because I am surrounded by a long legacy of educators and community activists and strong-willed people who knew that their goal was to uplift their community. And that's what teachers do. Like, beyond sharing content, teachers should be engaging the soul. And so that's really what my mission has always been. And I identify 100%, no matter how far up the leadership ladder I've been able to go and been blessed to go, I'm a teacher first. I'm a mother. I have 3 beautiful children, one of which was born right before COVID hit. So any mothers who who gave birth during COVID, I just want to say to you, you are a blessing to the world. You did so much hard work. Couldn't even call a family member for help, right? It was all on you. And we're almost out of it, right? We're still trying to keep our baby safe. But I have 3 children, one who is 14, going on 15. So I write a lot about him because he was my first experience mothering a Black boy. And that was traumatic in itself, and it continues to be hard. But I'm still very blessed to still have him with me and to be able to learn together this journey with him. I have a little girl who is a fiery 5-year-old, and she is going to be fine in life. But, I do call out in my book the data that's surrounded around our Black girls, right? And so even though she's a tough cookie and she's a really good student and she's reticent and quiet when she needs to be, which we all know most teachers love that, right? So they can get through their lesson. But so she's good at school, which is why I don't often worry about her. But when you look at the data, there's really nothing to say why I shouldn't be just as worried about her as my little boy or my oldest boy. And then I just recently gave birth to a baby boy, another boy. And what's so special about my son, my youngest son, is that he has Down syndrome. So that in itself was a journey of a pregnancy and also a birth. And now I'm a part of a new community, right? I was not only searching for finding my own self within images and representations across the world and just being a Black woman, a Black mother, a Black warrior in this, but now searching for a new community, still looking for those who look like me to feel represented, but now in a community, now representing children with disabilities. And so I found that community, but I also now represent in that community so that others can see themselves and say, oh, there I am. When I see her, I can be her, kind of thing. And my family's right here too. So that's another part of my identity. I'm a wife, I'm a sister. So, we are all multifaceted. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book is because I wanted to bring a very humanistic side to being of color. We want a lot of the same things, but they are just a little harder to come by.
Yeah. Well, and actually, we haven't officially said for the folks who are watching either us live or those who are watching the interview that Taryn has a fabulous new book out called In All Lanes. And so you are a mama of a new baby and a mama of a book at the beginning of and then through a pandemic.
Yeah. While homeschooling. I was homeschooling too, y'all. Yes. And working. So we do all the things, right? As we just get down to business.
Yes, down to business. And this book is available as of yesterday, right? The official launch date was yesterday.
It is officially published into the world. Gosh. And so we launched for quite a time. So, it's still in the launch period, but I'm so excited to be sitting with you because you're a launch team member. So you had like the exclusive access to the book. And like a day later, I'm sitting here in my first interview about the book being alive to the world. So super excited.
And you don't even have a hard copy yet.
No, I don't even have my own copy.
It hasn't been sent to you, but I am going to share my screen. And if this is working well, people can actually see the Dropbox version of the book, because I want them to see your cover. And Christine, who is listening behind the scenes, if you have access to either a link or the freebie that Taryn provided, let's put that there now, because there are all kinds of ways those of you watching can participate and support Taryn in getting the word out about this book. And one of them is signing up for the freebie. And another is just simply purchasing the book. I purchased the book. And in fact, as I was reading it, I hate reading digitally. So I wish that I had the paper, and I can't wait to go back and see it. And you know
what, if I can say just one thing about the freebie is really cool, because it is what I'm calling a selfie assessment. And so when you talked about us doing the work, right? As coaches, as in school time teachers and extended day teachers, after school time teachers, coaches, whatever, it's really important that we have an assessment to say, am I doing these things? And in this freebie, they're not super deep, right? They're just, they're actually teaching practices. So I'm not even asking, are you journaling at night and reflecting on your white privilege? That's not a part of the selfie, right? The selfie assessment is, are you assessing data with caution? Because assessment data tells a story. And if that story is told over and over based on the data you're reading, you begin to internalize a single narrative about a population of students. It happens all the time, right? And so it just asks simple questions like that. When you look at data, do you look at it with caution and think that there are multiple stories to this bit of data? Do you value the parents that are in your community and see them as experts, as co-teachers almost in your classroom environment? And simple yes or no. And if it's a no, it's a no. But if it's a yes, you can feel good about that and figure out how you can do more of it and how you maybe can pick up one more practice you want to work on. So it's super practical.
Yeah. Well, and I love, so what you just said there, and I might do this several times as I'm trying to make the link for those of us who are one-on-one with students in academic coaching settings. So the same thing applies, but like, do you see your client who you are one-on-one with as a co-conspirer in the work that you're doing to help improve their executive functions, et cetera, et cetera? Or do you see that you are like coaching them in this one directional way? So,
I may need some more clarity on your question, but I definitely see one-to-one coaches as another representative of a mentor, and so therefore, if you are closest to the student is closest to the problem and therefore closest to the solution, because it's very hard to have a bird's eye view and fix something on ground. You need to be on ground to fix something on ground. And so I view young people as solutions to this very complicated and complex problem we have in our school systems and in our communities. And so one-on-one coaches, you all are right there in the thick of it and can really speak to what's needed. But if not really aware, can also further marginalize too. So it's just important to know exactly what you need to do next. And that's what this book is really doing. It's giving you some action steps.
And I really appreciate the comment about further marginalizing. God, there are like 10 things I want to say right now. So I'll finish this. And then I want to go back to something you said a little earlier.
Okay.
But so my anti-boring educators community is largely a white community. There are folks of color in it as well. And the field of education right now is largely white. And you talk about that in the book. So one of the things that a lot of coaches have come, and white coaches have come to me asking, is what can we, like in academic coaching, people pay a lot of money for our services. So that means we're not widely available. And what can we do to be more equitable for, and then they often put like students of color in there. And so first of all, there's an assumption that students of color don't have money, and there are plenty of students of color who do have money and can pay for academic coaching.
Right.
But one of the things that I have, more and more people have been asking that question, especially since last summer. And I have said, it's such a good question. Let's figure out how to make our field and our industry more equitable in terms of money at the very least. But before we do that, let's make sure that we white coaches are actually going to be good coaches for students of a variety of different identities coming in, and then not, to use your language, further marginalize the students. So maybe there's another point about you being now a mother of in the disability community that I do want to talk about. So I'm naming that for us to come back to that.
Okay.
Let's maybe stick with this question about further marginalizing. And actually, I pulled one quote. There were so many quotes I could have pulled, but I pulled one quote from your book that I'll share right now. Maybe this is a way that we can dive into some of the actual content of what you wrote about. So, Christine, can you make me big for a moment so that people can see the quote? There we go. So this was on page 41, I think. When educators focus solely on teaching these three things, intellectual, vocational, and civic skills, which are often taught in coaching sessions as well, they demonstrate an attitude of cultural blindness, which detaches education from the world around us, our cultural experiences, our identities, and heritages. And this is Taryn Fletcher. So this really struck me because I thought this really pertained to this question of how we might further marginalize our clients of color. And maybe we could start by you defining, what do you mean when you say cultural blindness?
Yeah. So, I want to first pay the utmost respect to the gurus in the field that I also gathered research from. And so cultural blindness is something that Geneva Gay speaks of. And she has coined the term culturally responsiveness. And so there's a difference between relevancy and responsiveness, but they do work very interchangeably, and it's not probably worth getting in the nuances of the definition. So anyone wanting to further look at that research, please do begin reading Geneva Gay's research. And so cultural blindness is a lot like color blindness. So if we kind of thought about color blindness for a minute, color blindness is when someone is saying that they do not see color, they only see individuality. And so the difficulty in that is that my skin color actually makes up my identity. And that's because it is the part of me that is subjected to the most cruelty, right? And so it's not that you can take that away from me and then I'm just this other person. So that's why color blindness can often be referred to as another form of just discrimination, further marginalizing, and racist beliefs or insensitivities. Now, when you think about cultural blindness, it's this idea that particularly with people of color in marginalized communities, it's the idea that I need all these skills to level up. I need to get my reading skills up. I'm 2 years below. I need to get my understanding of analysis and be able to do all these manipulations with numbers so that I could master these skills. And that is more important than me understanding how these things are of importance to my cultural identity. And there's just not enough time for me to frolic in the understanding of who I am. I need to get right down to brass tacks, which is know these skills. And so what cultural blindness is saying is that, well, but when we learn throughout and within our environment. You can take that all the way down to early childhood. We know that you learn from everything around you, and learning is best when it's situated in its natural environment. And so why we think when we see children who we quote unquote are struggling, that we think it's best to remove them from that environment and only get down to the skill level. And then we wonder why there's a lack of purpose in it not making sense. Well, when you explain to me why, leveling up my reading skills and understanding how to analyze will actually help me in the long run, because when I buy a home, I need to be able to read, my contract, right? And that, that has a much further implication than just needing to read because it's important to be on my grade level. Right. It's and that's what that cultural relevancy brings about in the book. It's actually situating learning in its context. And we as Black people, we need that just like other communities do. And so, that understanding is not any different for someone of color to someone who is situated in white dominant culture. They too need a purpose for learning. And so that's what that research is really pulling out, and that quote digs at.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm thinking that coaches, particularly, like we see into so many classrooms, and that's we're in this unique, like outside of the classroom, and we actually, in some ways, have more access to the cultural context of any of our clients than a teacher ever does. And because of that, we're in a very special position to be able to make some connections for a student, even if they are in a school context or a classroom context that is very culturally irrelevant or irresponsive, as most are right now, right? It's a unique classroom or school where that's taken into consideration. And so in a moment, I want to move us into you sharing just briefly. Obviously, people can read the book to get the juicy details of the three different parts of what a cultural, I forget the word you use most often. Is it the
relevant?
Use relevant. Okay. Pedagogy looks like. But first, we haven't heard any stories yet from you. And it'd be fun to, I don't know if it might be fun to just start with your first experience being a school leader, because that didn't go well.
No, actually, you know what? Most of them don't. So if you know a brand new leader, pray for them. Because in most cases, leadership is hard, right? So I think that,
and I want to interrupt you just quickly before you start, because I want to just say to anybody who's live, I do have my eye on the chat. And so if questions or comments come up that you want me to address as Taryn is sharing with us, I can interrupt her, and if it feels relevant, and bring it up or save it for later. So I just want you to know that I'm here and I'm watching.
Yes, I love questions too. And so, okay, here's what I want to start with. So I walked into my first ever experience leading a school on my own, thinking all I want to do is lead. I didn't care where it was, how it would be. I just wanted to lead. And I was really struggling to get that first principal job in my district. I had done all the interning you could possibly do. I was in a teaching position and still like that, what they called an acting administrator. And that's code word for teacher with principal responsibilities. That's basically what it was. Work for free, right? Did it for 2 straight years. I wanted that badly to lead a school of my own. And, it was getting nowhere. I was applying. No one was even looking my way. Might get an interview, but mostly not even an interview. And so I decided, I'm going to go right across the bridge to Philadelphia. I'm going to go to Philly, and I am going to put my application there. I could drive there. It's not a big deal. Well, I applied to a charter network, and I interviewed on a Monday, and I was in my office on a Wednesday. And it was that fast.
Wait, Monday to Wednesday? I just took a second to take that in. Damn. Okay.
I interviewed on a Monday, was in my office on a Wednesday. So here is what I learned very quickly. This was an educational provider that was coming in to take over the school because it was deemed historically dangerous and it had not made any academic progress in more than 9 years.
Okay, historically dangerous. That feels very coded.
So what that means, they now call it persistently dangerous, but it's basically when a school has 24 drug or weapons violations in a year, and those things are replicated year over year. And so that was my school. Now, I did not know that on the Monday or the Wednesday that I got into the job. But, once I found out, I was already in the leadership world. I was already there. It was my baby, my responsibility.
My heart's palpitating for you just hearing.
Yeah, and so here's what I did. I did what almost every school leader does when they get into a new environment, especially one where they don't live in that environment or that community. They identify what in their mind they think school should look like based on their own experiences and their own understanding. They then create a culture that dismisses the values and the understandings and the beliefs of that community because, look, I have all this data that says you all do not know any better. Mm-hmm. And I need to come and fix you. Mm-hmm. Look at all this data that says you have years and years of not getting it right. Mm-hmm. So they called on me to fix you. And I'm sure many in your community listening right now are like, yeah, like I've heard that. I might even have done that, right? You don't know any better. You need me to come in and fix you.
Mm-hmm. And in academic coaching, what that often looks like is a parent calling us in to fix the kid. And then we decide what we think, we and the parent decide what successful student or school experience must be like. And so then we force those skills onto the kid without backing up and being like, who are you? And actually, what is it that you truly need to thrive and what's keeping you from thriving?
Yes. And so that's exactly right. And so what I did was I walked in and with my team, our first year was us deciding what it needed to look like. And it worked. It worked. But we had a very militant and what a former student described to me, I actually interviewed a former student described to me in the book as intimidating. A culture of intimidation is what I created. Mm-hmm. And so
this is the middle school. And so
it started as a middle school, and then because it was a charter, it grew grades year over year. But yes, this was a 6th to 8th grade when I started.
I remember the student that who you were emailing with. He's in college now, and he had said that he had a memory of being slammed down for a reason I don't remember now.
Yeah. He shared with me there was a day when he was sitting in class and his teacher had asked him to reposition himself. So I'm assuming he wasn't sitting as expected. His teacher asked him to get straight, be attentive, and that turned into him being defiant by way of, I'm not moving the way you want me to move. There may have been some words exchanged, but defiant being, you're not doing what I need you to do when I need you to do it. And what that led to her calling, at the time we had climate specialists. And again, we have a culture of intimidation right now. So the way in which our climate specialists intervened, and this is year 1, was almost like a security guard, right? So when there is a problem, the security guard comes in and removes the problem, right? Take out the cancer kind of thing. And so what that response for this young man was, him being asked to move by now security guards. And now I think we can all see this environment now. So now a whole class of students are watching. And if we know anything about middle school, you put them on stage and they will perform. That's really any kid, but but middle school for sure. Put them on stage and they will perform. And you will not be the one that is entertained. You will be the one everybody's watching and the entertainment, right? So here comes these adults coming to remove. He says no or whatever. And that just turns into control.
Mm-hmm.
That turns into control. And that's what he remembers. He remembers him not doing something. And, that may be a little foggy, but that what he remembers very distinctly is him feeling like he was violated by who were supposed to be his caretakers.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of reflection I had to do as a leader. Black woman had to reflect, right? This is not only about color, because this is also about social class. This is also about just not being of a community. And at first, I don't know that I was of the community. I was thinking I needed to come in and fix, right? And so I had to do a lot of reflection because I was running a school that I wouldn't put my kids in. And that was hard. Like,
oh, yeah.
How?
Yeah.
How do you run a school that you wouldn't want your child to go to?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is also falling at a time, was my first year. So I'm pausing here to go back to give you this context. So before I got the job, I had thought to myself, if I'm not going to become a principal, I'm going to go back to school and get my doctorate. Well, as you know, the world would have it, both happened. So I got into my doctoral program and I got the job. So luckily,
research subject.
Yes, luckily, I'm in a learning phase and I have a moment of not only my own reflection, but now of information that can actually save me in my practices and my school. And it just so happened that in my heart, I wanted to have a culturally relevant and responsive school, yet my actions were militant and intimidating. And so there was some change that had to happen. And so I rallied my team, who all too were very wanting the same thing, but following my lead. I always say the leader sneezes, everybody catches a cold, because we are the gatekeepers of the climate, right? And so long story short, we all started reflecting. We all started thinking about, is this going the way we need it to go? Do we have all the right people on the bus?
There's an important thing to name here related to the leader sneezes and everyone catches a cold. And it is the leader chooses to be a learner and everybody becomes co-learners.
Yeah,
that's opposite. Right. And it's like, what a better way to lead than to be a learner in public. And then your whole team comes along. And I have noticed, being somebody who's outside the school system looking in, and I was a teacher for a while, that sometimes teachers aren't the best learners.
Right.
They really need it modeled for them, how to stay curious and stay learners as they're working with students. And so it just seems like that is what you're modeling.
Yes. And there's a lot of vulnerability in that leadership too, to say, this is not going right. Yes. And yes, we have great lines in the hallway. We have silent lunches when we need them. Kids were no longer in the hallway. And this was a school that was known to have more children in the hallways than in classrooms. Wow. So we were rocking it on the checkbox, the list, we were rocking it. But the way it felt to be in the school, no, not so much. And so we had to think about, how do we still get the outcomes we need while also valuing who we are in front of? And really, it was releasing control. It was the mind shift of releasing control. And to your point, saying, whose community am I in? I'm the visitor.
Mhm.
You know, we're
Mhm.
the visitors. What does this community really need? And so much changed, a world of difference. I mean, it is still the school that my teachers and climate specialists will come and talk to me about, like, we did such amazing things. Like, it was their best experience. But we had to learn. We
Yeah.
had to do some learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And now as a result of that, and then projects that you went on to, you have, what was your phrase? I don't have my notes with me because I've been focusing on you, but there's a phrase, a turnaround leader.
Yes,
You called
yes.
yourself.
Here on the East Coast, there's, and I don't think it's just an East Coast thing, but there's a phrase of being a turnaround leader. And that's basically being a leader of a dysfunctional school system. Typically has predominantly Black and Brown community, typically has low performing achievement data, typically has high discipline percentages, you know, all the things that categorize you as not a great school or school system, right? A low performing school or school system. And so the term turnaround is meaning that this leader has the expert knowledge to come and turn it around. And so by way of this experience, right, that I just wanted to be a principal, I then turn around and become a turnaround leader that now I replicate over and over with different school systems. My largest being one where I served to support over 10,000 students and families and teachers in a very large urban district, again, to turn it around. So
I just accidentally discovered I can put a comment up here. So Suze, I hope it's okay that your name got shown. But I wanted to show the link for your book because anyway, I didn't realize it was going to interrupt everybody. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. And it's also on Amazon as well. So Amazon is sometimes a little faster and easier to use. But I will say, if you are going to Amazon, put in my first and last name because it just literally published. And so a little bit of dust has to settle on Amazon for any of you who have ever posted a book on uploaded a book on Amazon. It takes a few days for the dust to settle. But anyway, so I, by way of accident, right? Because I didn't set out on my vision board to be a turnaround leader. That's what I became. And so now it's really my mission. And you wouldn't believe how many of the same leaders that I used to be, I meet on a daily basis, you know, very willing and ready to make school better for our students, but they're coming to save, not serve. And that's the problem.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that savior mentality, partially because it's what I was sniffing a little bit in some of the academic coaches who were saying, we want to be able to be more equitable and have our services be used by more people. And one of the things that you talked about towards the end of the book, when you talked about your model and how you work with leaders, is the importance of knowing your why.
Yes.
And I want to just say a personal thing, and then you can comment on it. As I have the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working privately on my whiteness and understanding the socio-political implications of, that I am white and that I should claim the whiteness and then I should see how that's given me a lens. And anyway, I've been doing that personally. But then in the last couple of years, maybe year, I've been doing it more professionally. And each time, I'm like this good white person, whatever, trying to be right, coming to a coach or coming to a whomever. And I just see them just kind of side-eyeing me a little bit going, and why? Why is this important to you? And it would always catch me off guard. I would be like, but because it is. And I think some of that is my own lack of experience with really seeing the difference between the parts of me that want to save and the parts of me that really understand that my liberation is bound up in working on this, that, that the culture needs to change. And I have some personal stories too about my why. But anyway, I'm still on that journey of my why.
Yeah. I mean, and so I think what's unique, at least about the framework and the way I have been supporting leaders and teachers and coaches, is that when you are clear on your why and the values that you hold that really allow you to push toward that why,
Mm-hmm.
it helps you to better understand if you're saving or serving.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not only what our white privileged people need to do. It's also something that really helped me be clear about why I needed to release some control.
Uh-huh. Because you were trying to save.
I was, yeah, because I knew better.
Yeah.
I have all this knowledge. You had so many years of not knowing what you were doing.
Yeah.
That's why they chose me. That's also, that's a little bit of savior too.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was coming from a different place. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't of their community.
Mm-hmm.
I went over the bridge to be in that community. And so I didn't first step in saying, I want to be of this community. I want to walk these streets with you. I want to connect with you at the laundromat as opposed to you always needing to come to school during my hours.
Yeah.
Your school can become a hub of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we treat these schools as if they're just sitting here, but at a bird's eye view of the community that they're supposed to serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's pushing at that. And so before we get at all the goals you have, let's pause on the goals and just go back to your why and some of these core values that you're holding. Do they match and do they serve your community?
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Whether your community is a school community, whether your community is a number of parents and families, or whether you're or group coaching or whatever the community is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to, if I could share a little bit about what you had shared when some of the coaches are feeling like they want to support communities of color.
Yeah.
Here's what COVID did, right? COVID allowed us to have multiple options and access points to people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's still a little bit of a barrier when it comes to this suggestion I have, because we know millions of students did not have access to internet and high-speed internet, right? But the one thing we do know is that has put a glaring, flashlight on the issue. And many big organizations and school districts and school systems have been doing lots of things to fix that. Buses have become hubs, hotspots. You have Comcast with their initiatives. I mean, so many organizations have started to think about this. But what I would say, if you are a coach that is typically available and working with more affluent communities, which are not just white, but, affluent communities, doing things like free 30-minute Facebook lives with a skill or a tip, and then sharing those videos or connecting personally with a coach, a counselor, a leader, a teacher at one of the schools that you're hoping to kind of get that information in front of as simply a resource, is one way to share your privilege. In the book, I talk about sharing your privilege as the one way that requires no research at all. It requires no money at all, that you can actually get started on today. That could be helping someone open up a bank account that might not have the information on how to do that. That may be, if you're heavy in the stocks, sharing. How do you do that? That is simply speaking. Right? So it's free. You can do it on platforms that are completely available to people and just share the privilege. And because knowledge is privilege. And there are some information and systems that you've been able to walk, Gretchen, that I have not necessarily been able to walk so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And there are even some that I've been able to walk that people who look like me have not been able to walk so easily. But they're definitely more far and fewer between than they are for a white woman in America, right? And so what I'm saying is sharing those access points
Mm-hmm.
that at times we take for granted because it's just a part of us.
Right.
Taking a few minutes to think, I have so much, that's so easy for me to do. I
Yeah.
wonder if it's so easy for
Right.
whoever. And then asking, hey, this was so easy for me. Do you have any trouble with that? And then you'd be surprised what you hear.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this too
Yeah.
when you shared about starting your business. And there were some things that were just like super easy, whereas someone of color tried them and they needed a resume and a cover letter and 3 references and,
Right.
and it was shocking to you.
Yeah. I want to just say for people watching to fill in what Taryn's referring to as a conversation she and I had when we met. And I was sharing that. So I also train people how to start their own businesses as academic coaches. And I watched with some shock that the African-American women coming through my program struggled so much more for a variety of reasons that I was unpacking and still am unpacking than the white women in my program. And so that's one of the pieces of my why is my slowly coming to understand, as much as I felt it was hard to start a business, how much easier it was for me just because of the privileges that come with being white skinned.
And let me say, allies are needed, and we need not only allies but activators. And I have had so many in my life. I'm going to tell you, my 2 dissertation chair people were white women. Love them to pieces, and they shared privilege with me so that I could begin my path. I mean, the list goes on and on. My English teachers, most of them were white females. And they continued to tell me often, you're a writer. You are a writer. I remember that from 4th grade. And my college professor came to my book event all the way from Tennessee. She zoomed in, her internet was spotty and all, and she was there. So listen, sharing privilege, not to share it because I need to save you. Remember, this is, I know that if you knew this information and if I could help you with this, you would have all the access that I have, and you deserve that. You're worthy of that. That's what I mean by sharing that privilege. And so it's happened for me in my life by many, many educators who didn't look like me, but they shared it, and it's possible.
Yeah. Thank you for that and for your specificity there. I'm looking at the time, and I do want to hold us to an hour because I know we could chat for just.
We totally could.
And you've got babies in your household. I'm aware of. But here's what I want to name, and there's a specific way I want to wrap up. But what I love is that we didn't really get to talk about some of the juicy pieces of your book, but that's great because then people are just going to have to go read it.
Yeah, you have to read it.
You have to go read it. So I just want to name a few of the things that we didn't get to talk about, so that people know how much richness is in there. So we didn't get to talk about the 3 different components of culturally relevant pedagogy, which also is then culturally relevant leadership. And I personally felt that I don't even think we'll name them right now. I think we'll just let people go look at the book. But I found them so rich and useful as I was thinking about what it also means to be a culturally relevant coach. And actually, maybe we'll name one of the 3.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to, or do you want to decide which one you think is the most?
So I think the most accessible one and relevant one for the audience is this idea of having bicultural fluency.
Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm.
And so what that means, and I'll equate it to being bilingual, right? So when you're bilingual, you speak more than one language and you're fluent in both those languages. Mm-hmm. So when you're bicultural, that's the same idea. You are highly knowledgeable of your own culture, your own background and how you fit into mainstream culture. Mm-hmm. But you are also fluent in your students' culture. So I would pinpoint who you're working with. And for my book contents, it was Black and Latinx students. And so you're also building fluency and working to become fluent in their culture. Mm-hmm. But here's the key to bicultural fluency. It's not important for you just to know how you fit into mainstream culture and how your students fit. The reason why you want to know how your students fit in mainstream culture as well, and those nuances and differences between you and your students, is because you need to teach your students how to navigate white dominant culture. Mm-hmm. That's why it's important. And again, that's that sharing of privilege. It's that understanding that I know when I wake up in the morning as a white woman or white male, I am not thinking about my color. But I know that my student who wakes up every day as Black and brown thinks of his color every day. The minute you step outside your house, you're thinking of your color. The minute. The minute you get in your car, you're aware that you are in a car as a brown person. And so that's one of the main differences of how you're fitting into white dominant culture. It's just the prevalence of the color even being there.
Right.
And so, yes, that building bicultural fluency is so key, because then it makes things like Black History Month really clear as to why we should not just have Black History Month. Mm-hmm. We should be bicultural in understanding that Black History Month ended and it can't, because there is cultural contributions from this other group of people that should be acknowledged. It should be relevant to everything that we do all day, every day.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so that when you're bicultural, you think that you're like, of course, mm-hmm. like I get that. Mm-hmm. You know, my students should experience their greatness every day.
And I want to bring us back to a point you said earlier, which is getting curious and asking students about who they are. Because one of the things I noticed about myself early on in coaching, which is different now, is I feel scared to bring up anything that might be race or class difference. I would just be scared. And so I would just talk around, or I wouldn't talk about it all. Yeah. And so I wasn't finding out, who are you from your perspective? Right. And what is your actual culture?
Yeah.
How would you name your own, what your culture is? And how can I really get to know you from who you say you are, rather than who I perceive you might be because you seem like your skin tone makes you X, Y, and Z, or the money your parents paid for coaching puts you in a certain class level. And so I'm trying to have many more direct and courageous conversations with my clients early on about who they are.
Yeah, but I would encourage your community to, before going on the investigation, do two things. One, really can start to reflect, consciously about how you're fitting into mainstream culture today. I think that's going to be very helpful in even framing any questions that you might want to bring to your coaching experience. And then number two, begin to build your cultural background, your cultural expert knowledge, right? And so begin to make connections with greatness, whether it's less publicly visible or really visible contributions of other cultures. So when I say that, I mean, know about the greatness of Dr. Martin Luther King, which we all do, but also know about the greatness within the community that you serve, where there are also great heroes that are of color that exist there. You just don't know anything about them, and therefore you don't know that they exist, and you kind of then view that community with your perspective through white culture. So, it's just that idea of know yourself and get to know your community, the one you're serving.
And your book is structured so that at the end of every chapter, there are these, now I'm not going to remember the phrase again. You tell me the
know better, do better action steps.
Thank you. Know better, do better. And there's always a layer for the personal and questions people can ask themselves to do that personal work.
Yes.
And then
know better, do better.
Level. And then on the, I thought I was going to remember the personal, school, and curriculum.
And classroom. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's just that idea that we bring ourselves to school, right? So who we are absolutely permeates into the school culture, into the classroom culture.
Yeah.
And that was the learning. I was permeating all over my school. And so were all the adults, but the students didn't have a voice.
Right.
And they deserve a voice in the culture. They're a part of your school culture. So they're really the foundation of the school culture.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, before I move us into my final couple questions, you are available for consulting with schools, with nonprofits, with, I assume, individuals who are leaders, like someone like myself, who is a leader of an organization. So tell us just a little bit about how people can find out more if they're curious. I mean, obviously, reading the book, I would say, is the first place to start. What else do you want to tell people about?
Yes. So working with me directly. So the way I kind of think about supporting individuals, school systems, or organizations is in three ways. Advising and coaching. So being that individual or group support. The second layer would be training. And so once you read the book, I think you'll definitely have a lot of questions. And that's the point of the book. The book is not to give you all solutions, because one thing is that culture is evolving. And so if I were to write a book and say, here are all your answers, it would be outdated by the very next day, because culture evolves and people evolve. And so I can't wait for the next person, probably in your community, that will write a fantastic book on just taking my research and bringing it even more current as the world moves on. So training is the next layer that you need, because the research shows that in order to truly remain culturally relevant and responsive, you need ongoing training. So this is never a one and done experience. And so I often have long-term contracts with schools because we do this work all throughout the year. And then the third way is the ways in which I'm sure all your coaches are really involved in. That's in the curriculum design. What does it feel like to be a student in a culturally relevant classroom, and how do we make it accessible to them through our content and through our methodology? So those are the ways I work with individuals, schools, and also organizations. A lot of nonprofits are popping up to support communities, supporting communities to get jobs, supporting communities to open libraries. And they too are well-intentioned, but often do come in as the enforcer. This is what I think should be in your community. And so, I'm definitely here to support them in their effort, but through the lens of service and not savior. So they can email me. I mean, info@tarynfletcher.com. And then my website, teacherfuture.com, is also a place where you can find out how you can actually work directly with me. And I also have a Facebook page, which is at Dr. Fletcher on Facebook. So at Dr. Taryn Fletcher on Facebook.
There you go. I thought there was a missing word there, but I couldn't remember myself what it was. Yeah. So here's how I want to end. Given that, study skills and thinking about learning are my jam. So first of all, I want to find out, what is either the best or the worst class you ever took, and why was it? So you as a student.
Okay. So my favorite teacher of all time. So then it has to be my favorite class. I have one top and bottom of my experience. So fourth grade, I loved my fourth grade teacher so much. I invited her to my birthday party, and she came. She was a rock star. Miss Miller, who eventually turned into Miss Martin because she got married that year. So best class because she really supported us in being creative in writing. And so I had a phenomenal college course as well in English. She was a tough cookie. Her name is Ginny Kufta. She was a tough cookie. But when I tell you she made me a better writer, hands down, she made me a better writer.
Who's who we have to thank for the book?
What's that?
She's who we have to thank for the book.
Yes, definitely. And worst class, I mean, you know what? My mother, again, I was surrounded by educators. So I learned how to be a good student even when the teacher was bad. Like I was one of those, like, did everything I was told to do. It's funny, I don't necessarily teach my kids to be that way anymore. I teach them to ask questions, ask the why, right? But I never did that. So I don't even know what bad teacher I was.
That's fine. Well, and the other thing that I wanted to find out is what's one tip for students based on your experience juggling with your dissertation and juggling teaching and your family or whatever, like a tip for students about how to organize themselves to be able to achieve big things like you did.
Okay. So I'll give you 3. Because I live by these. First one, do a vision board. I know it may sound hokey, but I live by a vision board. So please get those old magazines, cut out pictures
for myself.
Yes. Cut out pictures and put the image in your head. Second one, I write all my goals in present tense. So I'm one of those that say I wrote a best-selling book. And I wrote that in 2018. And here we are. I actually did write a book. And so third one is small goals.
Yes.
Small goals, because small goals give you fast traction. And that's what you need. You need the small wins. So when you write a goal, make it really small. So I had a goal of writing a rough draft in 30 days. And I defined the 30-day draft as not necessarily even a coherent beginning, middle, and end. It was my thoughts on paper, and they were all over the place, completely jumbled. But it eventually turned into the book. But how much excitement I had when 30 days was up and I had a rough draft, right? I mean, I was on my way, you know? So small goals that you can really get done.
Yes.
And celebrate at the end.
Oh, that's beautiful. What a good ending. I think we need to, I would just want to give you a big hug.
Oh, yes.
Meet in person someday. And
yes, we're friends for life now.
We are. All right, everyone. Take good care. Oh, and those of you watching the video, let's give info@tarynfletcher.com is again how you can just reach out to Taryn directly if you have any follow-up questions even from this.
Would love that. Love that. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.